What's up, everybody? This is John with Archer Film. So I'm going to do a little bit of compare and analysis and tell you why the ending of this movie is so powerful, and it's the kind of ending that's going to live on because it really does tap into a universal human truth. It is Shutter Island by Martin Scorcese. The script was written by Leda Kalogridis, and it was based on the novel by Dennis Lehane. Before I get into the film, consider Dennis Lehane's work. Okay, some of the other books he's written is Gone Baby Gone and Mystic River, both turned into films. Now, what's interesting about those two are the themes that he typically plays with. Now, they're always like sort of crime thrillers. But, and also, if you haven't seen those two movies, I am going to spoil them, so maybe skip ahead a little bit. So he deals with, in those books, and those films, the nature of corrupt power and what it means to thrive in a corrupt world as a good person. And typically you have to become corrupt in order to survive. And that's kind of, the theme very loosely in those films. So back to Shutter Island. Now, plot-wise, it's very similar. I remember when this came out, and there were some old heads at the time telling me that it was a ripoff of a movie called The Ninth Configuration, so I watched that. Now, it is very similar plot-wise to The Ninth Configuration that came out in 1980, and that was written, the book and the script was written by William Peter Blatty, who also directed it. William Peter Blatty also wrote The Exorcist. So The Ninth Configuration stars Jason Miller and Stacy Keach, and the plot very basically is a colonel from the Vietnam War arrives at a castle that is being used by the U.S. government to house an insane asylum for military personnel. So his confidant is a doctor who gives him the rundown on the facility and the patients there. And as the sort of movie unfolds, we realize that this colonel, who's there to sort of run the place, is actually insane himself, and basically he committed some wartime atrocities, and he kind of had this break in his mind because he couldn't deal with what he had done, so he created this other persona for himself of a healer, a helpful guy, a doctor, whatever. So the idea, the theme is very similar. It's like, what does it mean to be a good person if you've done or are capable of doing horrible things? So in Shutter Island, Leo is a deputy marshal who arrives on this island that houses an asylum for the criminally insane because a patient has gone missing. So very similar setup to The Ninth Configuration. His partner and the doctor that runs the place are there to give him the rundown on the institute and the inhabitants. Just like The Ninth Configuration, in Shutter Island, the themes that start to emerge are, what does it mean to be a good person? And if you did something horrific, how does your brain sort of cope with that? And in the case of Shutter Island, the staff and the doctor there, again, spoilers, they have created this massive conspiracy about the facility. And the film itself goes brilliantly back and forth between, the reality of him as a cop being trapped there by this corrupt institution, or is he an insane person who just imagines all of this? And the truth is somewhere in between, and that is what makes this movie so good. In the end, we realize that the doctors, and one in particular, they have orchestrated this elaborate sort of play to try to get Teddy to face what he had done in his past. He committed this horrific crimes, and he blocked it out. And so they're trying to get him to face it. And the whole movie is this sort of labyrinthine unraveling of his mental sort of anguish. And when he finally does, sort of accept the fact that he did these horrific things, he's able to sort of be free and live his life with a twist. So what I find superior about Shutter Island is the theme is very clear and concise, and it doesn't trail off in too many theological directions like The Ninth Configuration. Shutter Island, rather, it examines like human psychology and our ability to want to believe that we are good people in an evil world, rather than us being the bad guy itself. He's created this role for himself as the hero, Leo's character has, because he cannot cope with what he's done. And I like how Lehane's novels and the movies based on them deal with the psychological justification for abuse of power and corruption, like doing it for a good reason. I think it's a more complex idea than simply like good versus evil. And what I liked about Shutter Island, when Teddy Leo realizes like what he's done, you know, the horrific things in his past, when he faces it, the process feels like a success as long as Leo's character acknowledges the horrific things that he did and accepts them. You know, then he can heal and move on. But we realize that he reverts back to where he was at the beginning. And, you know, we discover that, you know, they've done this process repeatedly to him. And they basically had one more shot to try it. And if it didn't work and he still believed he was a police, a deputy marshal investigating things, then he'd be lobotomized for his crimes, basically. And the Institute would be, you know, deemed a failure or whatever. So when we realize that the trauma and the protection mechanism of the human mind is so strong, and, you know, Leo's character is sent to be lobotomized, we realize it's a losing game, and that some part of him, and maybe some part of us, you know, thinks that he deserves to die for what he's done, ultimately freeing him. You know, there's a great line towards the end there, and it's, you know, what is worse, you know, to live as a monster or die as a good man? And it's incredible to me because just in that little bit of dialogue and at the end there, we get this sense of ambiguity almost with the character. Like, does he really still believe in the conspiracy going on around him that he has to investigate? Or after finally facing and accepting the horrors of what he did and being racked with so much guilt and feeling like a monster, maybe he just wants to end it all. Maybe that's all he thinks he deserves. Fascinating, and the ambiguity is there, but it's not without answers, I think. And the answers are thematic. You know, which is worse, to live as a monster or die as a good man? That's the answer. The film itself is very fun. It's very complex. It's a genre movie. It's got great twists and turns, great actors and great performances. I love the atmospheric mood, the twisty plot, and the sort of powerful music and the very emotional scenes. They really sort of hit you, I think. But it's that ending and that theme that always resonates with me, and I think why the movie will sort of live on. It was very successful at the box office. It got mixed reviews, but I think the movie will live on as one of Scorsese's best, mainly because of that interesting theme. That is something that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, like especially as conspiracy theories grow and in these complex conspiracies, there's just something about the human mind that would rather us imagine that we are the ones figuring out these evil conspiracies, and because it's easier to sort of comprehend than the sort of sometimes the banal reality or the fact that, you know, we ourselves, you know, bad people. So that's it for Shutter Island. I thought it was great. I thought it was better than Ninth Configuration, although the Ninth Configuration sort of, as it gets into things about faith and, you know, what it means to be a good person are fascinating as well. You feel like William Peter Blatty deals with that a lot, and like Exorcist as well, as this sort of delving into, you know, what it means to be a good person and self-sacrifice, which are interesting themes in and of themselves. I just think Shutter Island does it better. All right, that's it for me. See you in the next video.